Hello everybody, welcome to StraightA, Dawson here, and welcome to another week of NFL Power Rankings. As you see on screen, we have all the Power Rankings ready to go here, locked and loaded. But before we do, please leave a like down below, leave a comment down below of any suggestions you have, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm going to quickly go through all these explanations because I think at this point we're getting to the finalized portions of the season where my big explanations of things don't really matter. The only two things I'm going to get out right of the way are the Seahawks not moving up after a really key win over the Eagles, and the Chargers only going down 2 spots for their really big loss to the Raiders. The quick things I'm going to go over with the Seahawks, of course, they didn't go up or down because they played well, but there was also a big gap between them and top 10. From when I had everything laid out and ready to go, Seahawks had a little bit of a gap. They've closed that gap quite a bit already now, but I think the Eagles still proved themselves. I think the Jags are still very strong, and the Seahawks still have a lot to prove. It was a key win to getting them back in the conversation, but not quite enough to get them in my top 10. Take that as you will. The Chargers going down 2. They, again, 22 and down, had a big gap between them. Obviously, now the Chargers are that bridge of the gap away, because I believe that 21 and up probably has a decent gap there, or decent gap between the 23 and under. So them going down 2 was just a matter of circumstance in terms of there was only that many teams left at the bottom of that. It's another the bridge between the bad teams and not. So take that as you will. I still think there's some good highlights on the team, and I don't think, despite the score, the Chargers played horribly. Kind of similar to the Broncos against the Dolphins. Granted, against a divisional rival, against a bad team, the Raiders, or more bad team against the Raiders. Take that as you will. I think it just lined up, and I think there's got to give some credit to the Chargers, maybe another week, but I understand if you want them a little bit lower, because I probably would want them a little bit lower too, probably 24, 25, but I don't think they're a bottom 5 team just yet. Anyway, either way, we're going to start from the bottom here real quick. Panthers and Patriots. Panthers won, not impressively. Patriots had a decent loss. Record still better, so I just kept them the same. Commanders at this point are just poverty. They lost by a decent portion. I guess only one score, but either way, stats weren't pretty. Terry McLaurin had a good game. That's about it. Jets got destroyed by Dolphins. I think they had a more impressive showing than the stats show and even the game shows. Whatever. I put them right above the Commanders just because I think there's a lot more highlights for the Jets defense than the Commanders. Beside the point. Cardinals going up a little bit, had an impressive showing against 49ers, kept them in the conversation for the whole game. So that was promising to see. Kyler looked good. Defense looked fine. Enough, at least. Fine enough. I shouldn't say fine. Fine enough that they can maybe do something against other teams. Raise them above some of the other bad teams, but maybe keep them a portion below maybe some of the teams with better promise this season. Falcons, -3. I mean, you can't lose against the Panthers, and they can't, and especially in the stats they put up. I think I see a lot more potential in the Giants, the Bears, and the Raiders. They've shown promise, while the Falcons, I think, are just, step show down, and down. I'm not a big Falcons guy. I don't believe in the Falcons at all. As you see, I believe in the Bucs and Saints way more. Either way, Falcons are kind of drop dead to me right now, especially after that performance against a divisional rival. I get it, but against the Panthers too. Come on, man. The Bears and the Giants stay about the same. They had bad losses, but they had teams go above them. They had teams go below them. Take it as you will. I still give a slight edge to Giants because their performance was fine, while I think the Bears were detrimental. So take that as you will. 24, we have the Raiders. Raiders +6, obviously, with a very impressive win over the Chargers. Plus, with so many teams that they're just so bad below them, it's easy to jump pretty high with +6. Of course, like I said, I usually never go more than +6. +6 like special occasions. -5 or +5 is also pretty special occasions too. But 4 and down are pretty reasonable. Tennessee Titans staying about the same. It was fine. They had a win over the Texans. They had a gap to close. I gave them a slight bump up. Or sorry, they didn't win against the Texans. They lost against the Texans. And not bad performance. I shouldn't say not horrible performance. It was a bad performance. So they stayed about in between the Chargers and Raiders. I felt like that was a good bridge as well. Kind of you use the Chargers Titans bridge. That's a whole bridge from Steelers and Raiders. There you go. Steelers going down 5. It was abysmal. Their game was abysmal. They did not play well at all. The Colts absolutely destroyed them. Not much to say. There wasn't much promising for the Steelers there. And again, in the middle portions of this tier, even honestly, like especially from like 21 up, these teams are so close and switching all the time. 21 to 12, like 21 to 11 actually. They switch all the time. It's hard for me to stay consistent, especially with a lot of teams moving down, a lot of teams moving up. Broncos having a bad loss against the Lions, -3. Their stats aren't horrible, but that's what keeps them right above the Steelers. But 20s feels fine. Saints, good win. That's about it. I mean, I don't know what else to say. They had a good, decent showing against a bad team. Probably better than the teams that went down. Colts, very impressive win over the Steelers. You got to give them the flowers they deserve. They're in the conversation for a playoff run, so give them a +4. Packers, honestly, the -5 feels aggressive. Just how it turned out. I just don't. The Vikings and Packers are right here, basically, for me before, and the Packers probably did slightly worse, or significantly worse. I think the Packers technically above the Vikings last week. So I knew the Packers and the Vikings, basically, boom, Packers did that, and then they went down together, basically. Packers went down below the Vikings, and then they went down together, essentially. So they were right along. By the way, this is very poorly made this week. I did not line these up very properly. Sorry. So it's hard to kind of say. Actually, wait. The Packers went down -5, and the Vikings went down -1. Let me check something. My bad. I'm back. The Packers actually were a couple spots above the Vikings, and then I think they moved down significantly below the Vikings, and then they moved down together. That's kind of what I was shooting for there. That makes a lot more sense for me. So they went down a lot more just because they had a very poor performance, a loss obviously. Well, I think the Vikings had obviously bad, not a great performance, but I think there's flashes here and there against a good team. So while the Packers were the exact opposite against a bad team. Well, I shouldn't say bad team, against a mediocre team. Either way, I think this is maybe aggressive. Maybe you can put them in top 16 still, but I feel like I'm more comfortable keeping them in that 17 spot for now. Texans, I think that the defense is kind of carrying right now. They're showing flashes of goodness here. I think the offense is doing fine enough, I guess, especially in the run game. As long as the offense is fine enough and defense continues to carry, then they'll be fine. But we've shown the defense is actually very inconsistent. Meanwhile, the Bucs, I mean, I've been waiting for their breakout game. Baker showed out against a good Packers defense, and the defense held up against a good Jordan Love. It's kind of hard for me not to put them more above. I think the Bucs and Texans are right there with each other, and they went up kind of together, essentially. So I kind of gave the Bucs a little bit more of an edge, of course, because I think the Bucs were below the Texans before, but I think the Bucs just performed so well. They're still on the edge of like the more top 13 teams, but like I think the Bucs deserve a little bit more credit for what they're able to do, and especially kind of finding themselves from last week or from the beginning of the season. Beginning of the season they did well. In between that and now they did fine, and now they are kind of rising up again. So I think I could expect decent things from the Bucs going forward. Yeah, the Browns, they're fine. They're fine, performed fine. They don't change. Rams, of course, explosive as always. Their defense is what's really, really letting them down here. Honestly, the Rams offense, if it was just going off the offense, they'd probably be a top 10 team by now, if not top 8. I would really give them those flowers. They're a scary-ass team. Their defense is just so bad. The defensive line is either really good, or I should say good or bad, and it's no in between. The secondary is always bad. So it's easy to go into a shootout game with the Rams, and it's hard to beat the Rams in a shootout. Don't get me wrong, that's why they got +2, but it's still possible, especially if the defensive line is bad that game. Seahawks, again, I kind of explained that, but they kind of just closed the gap into that top 10 conversation. I think there's still a lot of key things missing for them to not be a top 10 team. The Jags are up next, -1. They're got to get their shit together. I mean, I've been saying that for a while now. They're doing fine enough to stay in games, but they're losing the games lightly. So this has been the conversation with the Jags the whole time, is that they're doing good enough to stay relevant. But in the beginning, they were winning games and staying relevant. Now they're losing games and barely staying relevant. So that's kind of the conversation about the Jags right now. Their offense is struggling. Their defense is struggling. Everything's struggling in that team. And it's really hard to see a really bright spot with the Jags going into the playoffs. Especially the Texans and Colts doing so well. The Eagles are up next, of course, -5. I think it's so tough putting them -5, but the Eagles have had it's kind of similar to the 49ers spot. The 49ers, when they had 3 games in a row loss, which now the Eagles do, when the 49ers did, they were clear number 1. So they went down to number 1, or stayed in number 1 for the first loss. Second loss, they were top 5-ish or top 3-ish. Next loss, they were like 6 or 7. Eagles, they started off lower than that, and they're getting off some bad losses. And 9, it just ended up being like that. I honestly looked at myself as -5 really appropriate. -5 is kind of for their third loss and for a team like the Seahawks. Like, I'm not saying the Seahawks are bad, but the Seahawks aren't the best team in NFL. And they've lost to them. It's really hard. Plus, when you look back at the stats for all like the defense and offense of the Eagles, there's nothing to be impressed by. There's nothing to say, hey, this team deserves to be higher. The Chiefs, Lions, Dolphins, Cowboys, Bengals, Bills, Ravens, and 49ers all have things above them. I mean, Chiefs you can maybe debate a little bit, but I think the Chiefs are more consistent. Lions and Dolphins are at least explosive and have good records, at least competing with the Eagles. Cowboys, of course, beat the Eagles in pretty handy fashion and showed that their defense is really good. Bengals and Bills have been really, really good and really hot, while the Ravens and 49ers are the clear winners here, or the clear leaders here. Chiefs, like I said, they're very consistent. They went down one for the Patriots. I mean, it's just because they just didn't show out as well as the Dolphins or Lions, but it's not like a big like, oh, they did bad. I think they did fine. They didn't look happy, but they did fine. The Lions went up 3. Beating the Broncos like that, I mean, you got to give them some credit. Maybe they're a little back. That's why they're kind of in the top 8 conversation still. Dolphins, +2. I mean, when you shut out a team like the Jets, especially with a good defense, and defensive Dolphins actually did really, really good. Probably one of the best performances of the Dolphins defense that I've seen this season. It was pretty good to see. Cowboys, obviously, with a loss against the Bills, it hurts a little bit, but it's kind of one of those situations where they lost. It's not pretty, but like I can't kick them out of the conversation just yet because they've been doing so well. So one bad game doesn't define a team. So -3, keep them top 5 conversation. I think they deserve it. Bengals, Bills, 2 teams are struggling to make the playoffs right now, only because the Bills had a bad record compared to the Dolphins. Or I shouldn't say bad, but a poor record compared to the Dolphins. And the Bengals are facing off against one of the best teams in their division or in the league. And then you have a bunch of random teams right along with them. I guarantee you the Bills and Bengals will make the playoffs, and they will beat the first round. They will win out with their first round and go into the second round. I don't know to tell you, Bills are so hot right now. They're doing really well. Defense is holding up. Offense is really explosive. The Bengals, I cannot doubt Jake Browning. I cannot. That's the only reason why the Bengals might be a first-round knockout is because of Jake Browning. And he's holding up, though. He's giving me no reason to say he's not holding up. The defense is actually doing decently well, holding up some things, and the run game's actually getting established. I can't say much bad about the Bengals. They're consistently going up. Sure, I gave the Bills a slight nod this week for beating a better team, but the Bengals are still right there, neck and neck. And I can't really fault them too much for, barely beating a fine team, I guess. So it's because everybody does that. Because meanwhile, you got the Ravens +1. Of course, their performance against the Jags wasn't the best. So take that as you will. And that's kind of also to the Jags' credit, is that they only moved down 1 because they did face one of the best teams in the AFC, or the best team in the AFC, depending on how you look at it. I think the Ravens, and for one, the 49ers and Ravens face off this next week, so I cannot wait to find out who would be number 1, number 2. This is for number 1 versus number 2. I think it's going to be the 49ers, but still. I think Lamar had a very impressive game, and that's about it. Isaiah Likely and Lamar. That was what the game really entailed. Defense did fine. Run game was fine enough. Other receivers were fine. They did their job. That's all they really need. Lamar continues to do what Lamar does. Either Lamar has a really good game in the air or a really good game on the ground, or kind of good in both ways. That's all I really can say about the Ravens. And the 49ers, of course, are the most elite team in the NFL currently. Their defense is great. Brock Purdy's been doing amazing MVP-type numbers. CMC is doing MVP-type numbers. The receivers, including George Kittle, each of them are eating in one way or the other. It's just hard to stop that team the way they are. They might falter when it comes to playoffs, but right now they are the team to beat. And this might be record timing for my NFL Power Rankings, so I'm going to leave it off here. Thank you guys for watching. If you do enjoy, again, subscribe and click the bell notification icon, and I'll see you guys later. StraightA Dawson, out.